Hello, welcome to Clarity Design. We're in Photoshop cs5.5 and I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the interface so that you've got some ideas what's going on the screen and where things are. So cs5.5, it's quite a nice interface, not quite as nice as cs6 which has now come out, but let's have a quick look at what's going on. This will give you a basic guide as to how things are going. Right, so first of all we've got, let's just make a new page. So I'm going to go File, New. Now anything to do with File obviously comes under File. These are fairly straightforward, these things up here, and you start to guess where stuff is after a while. So if you want to edit something, you go to Edit menu, it's normally in there. If you want to manipulate an image in some way, the whole image, then it's in here. Again, if you want to do something with a layer, then it's normally in there, select, etc, etc. The most important one to note for now is probably the window, which allows you to set up the look of the features and these little windows that you can see going along on the shelves and toolbars and stuff, so that allows you to do that. So that's probably the most important one to note at the moment. I'll just set this up with the International Paper Size A4 and leave it as white at the moment. And I'll leave it as Untitled 1 because I'm not going to save it. So there's your paper. If you want to rotate it, very simply, you know, people immediately come in, they go, I really want to have a landscape page. How do I do that? Well, I want to change the image, so you go to Image and you're going to go to Image Rotation 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, doesn't matter, and that will give you your landscape. People, when they first come into the program, they put an object in, like a photograph. You place a photograph. So if I'm going to place a photograph in here, I'd go to Place. Then I could go and find an image, particularly good image for this year. There we go. And once it's placed in the image, click Tick up here. Once that's happened, and I want to move it again, I can move it around. But how do I resize it? Well, what I need to do is just go up to the top. Now this toolbar up here. This changes depending which tool you've got selected. At the moment we've got this selection tool selected with the arrow, so the pointer, and just here it says show transform controls. Now that could be really tricky to find if you don't know where it is, but it immediately enables you to reform, reshape, rotate that object really easily, and you just got to remember to click tick before you finish with that tool. And then you'll be ready to move on. So how does this sidebar work over here on the left hand side? So we've got selection tools at the top, so you know where to look things. If you've got a little arrow next to it, it means if you hold it with the left mouse button, then you will be able to find other objects or shapes underneath it. Then below this line, so that's a colour picker, and then below this line down to this line, that's all to do with adding paint, removing paint, smudging, etc. And you can see there's a paint bucket there. By default you'll see the gradient tool, and again that was just left click, hold it down, and you'll find the other tools. Below that line you've got the vector tools. This is allows for some vector drawing within Photoshop. Mostly used is the text tool. Now a vector tool layer, so this is a smart object which I've pulled in. You can tell it's a smart object because of the icon in the corner of the layer here, meaning it's not embedded in the image. It still knows where the original is, and if we change the original then it will update in Photoshop. So that's what a smart image is, and you can see the layer down there. Now if I make a text layer and if I just type some text, it's going to be really small. Instead of just clicking and going for it, I could resize it up here, or I could go to Design and change my layout on the right hand side, and that will actually give me a nice layout for my character development here, and I can play around with that. So click there and start typing in, and you'll see that that layer looks different to the other layer. Okay, it's got a big T in it. It's just telling us that that's a vector at the moment, not an image. If I want to rasterize it, I can turn it into an image, is what I'm saying. So if I want to rasterize it, I can right click on the word or the panel here next to the image. I can go up and rasterize that type. But be aware, if you do that, it has turned it into an image now, which means that we can use it as an image. But the problem is that I can't go and edit the text on that anymore, so do be aware of that. So yeah, there's your text tools, vector tools, and we've had a little bit of a detour, and then we've got some rotation tools to do with 3D, and then a pan and a zoom tool. You don't really need that because well, the pan might be useful, but the zooming is just a Control plus and Control minus on the keyboard, so the plus and minus at the top of the top of your keyboard there. So that's how to zoom in and out. And then you've got your two colour swatches at the bottom, a foreground one and a background colour palette. Obviously you can change that, and this little icon here just swaps the two, so you can swap between them. The other one changes it back to black and white, and then the icon at the very bottom is a smart, it's a quick selection mask tool, so you can use that later on if you want to have a play with it. So yeah, so at the top, every time you select a tool, something different will change. If you see an icon like this, it means it's got a menu that you can go into. So the brush menu is a brilliant menu to play around with. Immediately I'll just go to a brand new layer, so that's new layer down there, and I can start painting that on here, and go into my options on a brush, start playing around with my options on there, what I want it to look like, how I want it to apply to the surface. So yeah, you can keep playing around with these brushes and tools endlessly to generate new options for yourself. So that's pretty much this bit here. Do notice the help window, and if you get stuck with, you've rearranged or you've dragged something out you didn't mean to, maybe you've lost something, you can't find it anymore, you want it back, just in the window go to Workspace and you can reset the current workspace and it'll put it back to how it was to begin with, which is quite nice. Let's just close that up. Yeah, and up here you've got your color swatches. Now if I go back to essentials, that will change, so you've got an RGB one up here, and if you want to change that again, so you may be used to using a CMYK or web sliders, it's entirely up to you and your preference as to which ones you use. Obviously if you're working for different outputs, it helps to know which one you're using and what's going on. It's also quite nice sometimes to have the histogram open if you've got photographs happening. These two icons here, that's the history, and we can, there's loads of menus and stuff that's not here, so just be aware that all these ones that aren't ticked are ones that aren't open at the moment. So here I've got paths, so that's to do with the vectors, and if I generate a path for you, you can just see how that starts to sit there. So if I lose it, if I deselect, it's still there, I can get it back again. Often with very beginners, when you start seeing this, you think you've put black paint on in kind of a pencil line across the canvas here, but you haven't. It's just a vector at the moment. If you want it to turn up like paint, you can do a number of things. You can either work over here or actually on the selection itself, but you can right click and you can actually stroke that or fill that path with the brush tool that you've got selected at the time. And that you can see how that makes a nice smooth line for you. So it's often quite a nice way of controlling the application of paint, but there's loads and loads of reasons for having it there. Channels gives you colour separation and allows you to see how those are separated out, so you can see the different colours. That's often useful for generating selections as well, so be aware of that. But the one that you'll be using most of all is this layers panel. I'll just take a second to take you through a couple of things here. So this is obviously your layers so far, and you can see that they build up one on top of another. So if I lift that one down to behind the 2012 logo, you'll see that then drops behind it. So it's like laying a piece of paper, then another piece of paper, etc., etc. You can change how solid that appears in terms of transparency or opacity, and the fill. So there's your transparency and there's your fill. And then you can also change how it interacts. So I'll just choose this photo layer, and if I change that to multiply, you can see how that changes the interaction. And then if I press down on the down arrow, it will change how that image interacts with the other layers around it or below it. So that helps a little bit. And then this is pretty cool, FX. We'll have a look at that in the next tutorial. And we've got various other icons down here, including mask tools. We'll cover that in another time. You've got your adjustment layers, which is what we can see here, and you've got your trash can. So should you want to get rid of something, if you don't want to press the delete key, you can actually drag and drop onto this, and if I want to duplicate a layer, I can actually drag that onto the new. So that's quite a useful little thing. So I'll let you have a play around before we do anything serious with Photoshop, and we start actually doing something productive. I'll let you have a play around with the interface and see what you can find out for yourselves. Enjoy!